Hi, my name is Jeremiah Robison, founder and CEO of CIONIC. We build bionic clothing to enhance human performance and overcome disability. Welcome to another episode of our podcast, Superpowering the Human Body, where we explore the science and technology of human augmentation. Today on the show, I'm so pleased to be joined by Dr. Stacy Menz, founder and owner of Starfish Therapy, where she created an interdisciplinary pediatric therapy group that not only loves working with children, but excels at it. Stacy, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Now, your career has been focused on pediatrics and working with children with mobility delays and differences, including cerebral palsy and other disorders. Can you tell me a little bit about your patients, a little bit about their journey, and about how your practice focuses on their needs?
Sure. So we work with kids of all abilities. A lot of our kids have some maybe not neurotypical and have some neuro differences like cerebral palsy. We also work with kids with like genetic differences, anything where it's going to impact the way that the muscles function so that they can produce movement. And so we will also have kids that have just injuries, but that is not the primary area that our practice focuses on. We will see kids from very early that are just having some of those developmental delays where maybe they're just not hitting their milestones. And some of those kids may end up with a more significant diagnosis, and some kids will just catch up. So what we really work to do is empower the parents to support the kids in their development. And the main focus is to help the kids be able to do the things that they want to do. And maybe when they're really little, they might not know what they want to do, but it's getting them through some of the developmental sequence, getting them stronger, really focusing on the needs, because it's not, my goals aren't the important ones. It's the child's and the parents' goals that are important.
Yeah, that's a great point. And setting goals and allowing the individuals themselves, regardless of whether they're a child or an adult, is what are your goals? And we often talk about at CIONIC, how do we create solutions to help people continue to do the things that they love,
Yes.
or do the things that they want to do that they love? What's the key? How are you most successful? What do you think the keys to creating that success for your kids?
So, a couple things would be one, making it fun and motivating for the child. Nobody wants to do something that they're not motivated to do. It's way more fun to go to the playground than it is to clean the dishes. So really trying to make our therapy play-based so they enjoy coming. We also work really hard to find ways to help families incorporate it into their day-to-day, because we're not going to make a difference with somebody just coming once a week for an hour. We look to how can it get incorporated into the day-to-day to carry over, because then it becomes part of the routine and they get that much more practice and repetition, making it easier for them in the long run. And then in this hand in hand with that is helping the parents find ways to do it, because if they have more than one child, if they are working, all the things, like, we don't want to make it a laundry list. I remember one time we had a parent come to us and they had gone somewhere else first, and they were told that they had to do this list of exercises 10 times a day. And the mom looked at me and said, "Do I need to quit my job?" And I was like, no, let's look at what's the most important one, what you think you can handle, and how we can fit it into your day.
Absolutely. That's key. If it's not sustainable, it's going to be really hard to make progress. And it's easy for children, our child, to get discouraged, and finding ways to make it fun and enjoyable and part of play, key to her development, but also her being able to set the goals and strive for them.
Yes.
I want to take a step back for a second and talk about some of the science behind it. Now, you published a number of papers, including one on developmental coordination disorder, and you just discuss really how neurotypical development is marked by an unlocking of degrees of freedom of movement, and that some of the challenges that DCD or other movement disorders are marked by is an inability to unlock those degrees of freedom. Describe that in a little bit more detail so that our audience can understand that, and then talk through what are the techniques that you have found effective at unlocking new coordinated movements.
Okay. I will give kind of a really simple example. So a lot of us have seen a child that's a new walker. Like they have those arms up, like they're like, wobbling side to side. There is not a lot of movement happening other than their feet. Well, as they get balanced better, you see the arms start to come down. You start to see some rotation in the trunk. So they went from holding the whole top half of them as one solid block, so locking out all those degrees of freedom, to slowly bring their arms down and letting some of that rotation come back to the spine, getting the arm swinging, so adding layers to the movement that makes it look more like how you or I would walk. So that's one way of looking at the unlocking degrees of freedom. The spine is one area where it does happen a lot. Another place might be the knees. So, if somebody is trying to like sit down or go down a step and they don't trust that their muscles can support them, if they bend that knee to slowly lower, they might keep them locked out and it becomes more of like a plop down. So what we like to do is we like to give the kids opportunities to practice that and work on unlocking it. So in the developmental coordination disorder study, what we found was that by using the universal exercise unit, which is just a tool that we have that allows us to provide resistance to movement, it let them take a movement that for the most part was a single degree of freedom. There might have been maybe 2 degrees of freedom. So like, just think about like bending your elbow, and it let them practice that movement over and over again against a consistent force. So they got, their brain and muscles got that practice of like, oh, I want to bend here. I want to bend here. And so they learned how to just do that without either tightening up somewhere else or doing extra movement somewhere else. And so what we do is we practice with that, and then we carry it over to actual functional movement. So in the case of the unlocking the knee, we might have them practice just that movement of bending the knee, sitting down. We might practice like going from standing to a high seat, so they don't have to unlock as much. So we grade the movement also. And then we'll go carry over practice stepping down. So working on the same action, but in different ways, but with lots of repetition.
Yeah, sort of breaking down the problem into smaller subsets.
Yes.
One of the things that I noticed in that paper was this difference between feedback control and feed forward control, and thinking about things that you talked about, contracting a muscle against a resistance versus unloading a limb into free space, and some of the challenges of coordination and planning, that movement planning that have to happen there. Can you talk a little bit about that difference between feedback and feed forward control?
Yes. So feedback, let's see. Feedback would be, so you're on the subway back when people took public transportation and it moves quickly and your body has to react to that movement because an outside force or movement was imposed on it that it wasn't prepared for. Feed forward, and actually maybe that could be somebody who gets on the subway for the first time. Feed forward would be somebody who gets onto the subway that commutes daily, and they know that when it starts, they're going to have a jolt. So they're able to get their body prepared for it before it happens. Does that, I can try to come up with more examples of.
No, absolutely. And one of the things that, I find interesting in looking at our own daughter and some of the things that we are trying to reinforce with our technologies at CIONIC is how to create the connection between the plan, right, and what the actual outcome is. And you talk about, feet missing where the intended movement is going.
Yes.
You do that through exercise and do that through strengthening. Think about some of the other techniques that you use to help really map intention to outcome.
So, I mean, we do a lot of different things, I talked about, we use the universal exercise unit just to give some movement experience.
And what is that unit? What is that universal exercise unit? Can you describe it?
It's a pulley system that allows us to add weights in very small increments, so that we can do strength training for kids. However, in the prepubescent population, strength training is by helping the muscles become more efficient and effective. So you're not going to necessarily see like the body bulk. So it's really working on helping the muscles coordinate movement, if that makes sense. So it gets better with the message from the brain telling the body what it wants to do, which then carries over to what we were just talking about. We also use things like the Wii Fit, besides the fact that the kids love it and it's fun. They are either trying to play a game that involves weight shifting, moving forward and backwards, adjust. A lot of it's weight shifting. I'm just going to keep coming up with new ways to say weight shifting. Or they're doing yoga poses, where they are finding balance and getting better body awareness, because then it'll track like how much sway they had, how stable they were. And so while we're looking at that kind of stuff, they're just thinking that they're having fun and getting to play a video game.
Right. It's amazing how technology that may be intended for a totally different purpose when used within a therapeutic context can provide, sort of a blend between the fun experiences of gaming and, the therapeutic necessity of strengthening balance and proprioception. So
yes,
we actually do leverage gaming in coordination with our wearables to help reinforce those body positions as well. So it's a good segue into technology as a whole, and one of the challenges that we've seen and we hope to address is a lack of technology and technological advancements. If we think about what assistive devices are available today, it's crutches, canes, walkers, wheelchairs, the same things that have been available for a long time as assistive devices. And yet we have, cars that can drive themselves down the road. You talked about the Wii Fit. Are there any other technologies that are used in your practice?
We have done a little bit with electric stimulation. We don't use it as often, but we do have seen benefits with it. We don't probably, we've started doing telehealth, but that's like a slightly different technology. The challenge sometimes being a small practice is there are technologies out there, but they are outside the budget reach. So they're almost inaccessible to a practice like mine. So we'll look at different things, or if we can find low tech ways or other ways that we can take something like using the Wii Fit, and make it into that. The other interesting thing is, just even using a treadmill or things like that, there are some, or a vibration plate. So all of those are available. But what can be limiting is some of the assistive devices and technology is either bigger, or it adds it's hard to use out and about in the real world, especially for a child that may be self-conscious about their differences or want to fit in. Even just something low tech with braces. We have kids that opt out of wearing braces because they want to wear shoes just like their friends. Yeah. So it's constantly finding that balance and being able to support them with that to maximize what they can do safely and help them to want to do it or to not be self-conscious.
Yeah, you make a really good point about the stigma of disability and stigma of assistive devices. And one of my favorite companies, Open Bionics, has been applying design thinking and that socio-emotional needs of their patients as well, and making partnerships. So they make a prosthetic hand, and the prosthetic hand looks like Iron Man's hand, or it looks like Luke Skywalker's hand, and all of a sudden something that used to be this sort of really not appealing, sort of tries to be plastic looking flesh, became something otherly. It is something bionic, something that feels enhanced. And you hear stories about that in MRI machines that are painted up to be their favorite fantasy lands. And I think that as we think more and more about that, it's not just kids who respond to that, and it's adults as well. And over time, I strongly believe that more and more assistive technologies will reach the same status as eyewear. Eyewear is something that it helps people overcome a vision difference, but it's also a fashion statement, and people can be expressive. And there's just so many people who have it that it's just sort of fashion, right? So you did talk about telehealth, and we are still in pandemic times. Talk to us about your transition to telehealth, the pros, the cons, and what you see as the future of remote healthcare.
Yeah, so we were lucky enough, I guess you could say, that I had been doing a lot of research into telehealth prior to the pandemic hitting, because I was looking at ways to be able to reach a greater geographic area. In smaller towns or other places, there may not be the support that families and parents want for their children. So how can we support them? And so I had been looking into it. Part of the challenge is change is difficult for anybody. And so we had been working on introducing it to our staff and really talking through what they foresaw the potential challenges to be, the obstacles, barriers, and really trying to address those. And I laugh, I had actually gone down to the clinic that Monday, I think March 16th, to answer questions, go over everything. I had done some practice simulations and really address all their concerns. And at lunchtime, the stay-at-home order came through, and we saw our first telehealth first child through telehealth that evening. So, it was great that we had already done a lot of that legwork leading up to it, and not to say that there still weren't concerns and perceived barriers. But what was great was we had the infrastructure ready to go. And then it was really about the therapists buying into it so that they could help the families and the children buy into it, because it is an option that is there. It is not perfect for everybody. One of the things that we really had to talk through is there was some kids that didn't cooperate, or they don't work. I mean, shocker, kids didn't cooperate, but the parents have trouble getting them to do anything. The child listens to the therapist in terms of some of these more challenging things more than the parent. So one of the things we looked at was this is an opportunity. Even if it seems like nothing is getting accomplished, if by the end of, say, several weeks, a parent is able to get their child to walk with them where before they would refuse to, that is a huge gain, and that has accomplished something. And it may look different than us putting our hands on or us facilitating the movement, because we're now empowering the parents to carry this over. We've also empowered the kids. We've had several kids that they run their own thing, or they'll be hold on, I'm out of the screen, let me fix this, or we get kicked off and they get back on. And so they're taking initiative and ownership of their exercises and their goals. It's helped for parents learning, again, like I said, how to support their child, but also really showing us how they are able to do the exercises or activities with their kids, and then troubleshooting. Sometimes in the clinic, it's too easy to be like, oh yeah, I understand. And we don't always get to see them do it, and especially not see them in their regular environment. And so we've been able to support with troubleshooting, also by seeing their environment, really come up with solutions for the family, or see some of their day-to-day struggles that maybe we've heard about but couldn't visualize before. So there's been some really great things. We've definitely had some challenges with kids who maybe are on the autism spectrum, and not just them, but that this comes up a little bit more frequently with them, where electronic devices like screens are used primarily as an incentive. And so by making it therapy, it's taking away some of that benefit. Or the kids are just, if from being in school, they are done with screens and it's too much. So we've still looked at ways to get creative with that too, whether it's the parent having something up higher or talking through with us. And also some parents just don't have the time right now. And or they have multiple kids, they're working remotely, they're helping their kids with school. So those are some of the challenges. We're doing a little bit more of a hybrid now, but I don't think that the telehealth is going to go away. Even as things start to open up, I think that there has been some conveniences for families. I think that it cuts down on commute time, especially in the Bay Area. Like that can be a big challenge. And it could be too, like that the parents can't get to us in time after work with the commute, but now maybe they can do one session in the clinic and one session remotely. So we've just really looked at how, again, it allows us to support our kids and families even more and fit into what they're capable of. As we talked earlier, I can come up with the world's best plan, or I could tell you, you need to come 3 days a week and do these exercises another 5 days a week. And it's going to look great on paper, but it doesn't mean anything if none of it gets done. So while we set a plan, we then work with the family to find out what's going to work best so that we can prioritize the pieces that are most important.
Yeah, you mentioned a couple of things that are advantages in telehealth, and one of them that we talked about a lot as being a gap in care is understanding real world context. And for our daughter, she can go in and have a gait analysis performed in a lab, and they can tell her which things she needs to work on. Then she gets into school in her classroom, and people are bumping her and jostling and all these things. And it's like, how do you better understand contextually their life? And with a remote telehealth session, at least you can see what their world is like at home and start to come up with solutions for them in home. Over time, we hope that technology like ours and others can provide context and really able to visualize both what's happening within the neuromuscular system and what's happening within their environment, so we can start to have more nuanced strategies for them to move throughout their world.
Agreed. And I mean, and that touches on too, like one of the big things we do is it's no good if the child can do a skill only with us or only in the clinic. We need them to be able to generalize it out to their day-to-day life. And so, it's great the first time they accomplish it, but like, what are the other scenarios that you need to add in there so that they can help prepare for them and have some of that feed forward control.
Yeah, that's right. And I do know that you are an adjunct professor at a number of different physical therapy schools, as well as a guest lecturer at others. How are you helping to prepare this next generation of therapists for what the world might look like and how therapy can be advanced?
So one of the things that's been interesting is, we've now done several labs virtually because of the way that times are. And so it's helped right there to have students think outside the box, to be able to see maybe some more real life situations, as opposed to just having a child come in or only doing simulated activities. They've been able to put stuff into application. I've also spent a lot of time talking about like it's what's important for, like what we talked about earlier. It's the family and the child's goals that are important. It's not, can your child stand on one leg for 10 seconds? That doesn't mean anything in the real world. It's what can they or can't they, what are they not able to do that improving their balance would be helpful. So the goal might be that they're going to get from the car into school independently, and that involves them having to be able to step up a curb. So really making the goal functional and really having them see that, because a lot of times their thoughts are around more of an outpatient orthopedic setting where it's like, oh, I have pain in my shoulder, I need to get this much strength and this much range of motion. And just how it's more global with kids, and really helping them to understand that and to see how important it is to make it fun. You can't just tell a child, I need you to go do 3 leg lifts. Looking at like adults and kids, an adult, like I could work with maybe 2 at the same time and kind of go back and forth between them. No, kids, you need to have like your focus on them, because not only sometimes are you corralling them or you're helping them, you're also keeping them motivated. You're setting up the scenarios or the environment. It may not be that they're going to follow a command, but if we set up the environment where they have to do the skill that we want them to do, we get it that way. And that kind of looks at the like single leg stance versus being able to walk into the school. So walking into the school sets up the environment of having to step up a curb. So they're getting that practice every day rather than just standing by a step and stepping up and down.
Yeah, absolutely. Function is everything. How do you help people move about their daily life and do the things, as we spoke about earlier, that they love to do? You've had a great and fantastic career in physical therapy, and when you think about the future and what does practice look like, we talk about the science and technology of human ability. Let's talk about the sci-fi of human ability. What does it look like 20 years? What does your practice look like? And how will we better improve our world and environment for people who are living with disability?
I think that's a great question. And I think it's always great to look to the future. And one of the things that I think is going to have the biggest impact is the normalizing of disability, where it's not somebody is different. It's just that that's who they are. Just like I have curly hair and somebody else has straight hair. It's just part of who that person is, and the disability doesn't define them. I think that advocacy continues to grow and it continues to be a conversation. And through that, we continue to improve access so that we're not constantly looking to the individual to make all the adaptations. The world is adapting so that having a wheelchair or having a walker isn't the limit anymore, because right now the limit really is, can they access spaces? Like I know my apartment building, there's an elevator, but you have to get up 4 stairs to get to that elevator. So I have a friend in a wheelchair who can't come over because of that. And I think through all of that, it continues to drive more research, which helps with improved design, as we were talking about earlier. It helps with improved treatment techniques, or other, not just modalities of treatment, but how we approach treatment and therapy. I also, I don't think some of these devices, we've talked about design, I don't think they're going to go away. They might look different or whatever, but they've become more normalized, and so that it decreases, not like in looking at the kid population, it decreases parents being self-conscious or the child being self-conscious. I've seen it go both ways. Like I've definitely seen the parent who it doesn't want to go out because they don't know how to handle questions or situations where their child may not be able to, where the child doesn't know any different. And I've also seen where the parents maybe are pushing for the child to do more, but they're very self-conscious. A lot of it depends on where the age is for the child. So I think that what's going to happen in the future that will be the biggest impact is all of those things will culminate, so that it's just like us wearing glasses, like we talked about earlier. It's just part of who we are.
Well, I can tell you I'm excited about that future one where a person's difference is just part of who they are, where technology has provided access to the things that they love to do. And so that no longer disabled means not able to do something. But if we're able, even if we have a difference or we have a disease or we have an injury that would have previously prevented us from doing it, maybe we can find a world beyond disability.
Yes, I would love that world.
Well, that's all for this episode of Superpowering the Human Body. Thank you all for listening. And thank you, Stacy, for all the work that you do and for joining me today and sharing your perspectives.
Thanks for having me.
You can subscribe to our podcast on SoundCloud or YouTube so that you never miss an episode. And until next time, this has been Superpowering the Human Body.